Hi, everybody. So, as you probably know, if you've been looking at my Instagram page today or my YouTube, I am thrilled about this latest development in the Marilyn Manson case. And I had someone with some legal expertise, not our guest that I'm going to introduce in a moment, but I had someone else with some legal expertise warn me that I shouldn't get my hopes up that this lawsuit it may not be a winner, but I don't care. Today is a good day, and like I said in a video that I posted earlier, it's been like over a year now of people thinking that I'm crazy because I have devoted so much time and effort into making videos about my belief in Marilyn Manson's innocence and my belief, at least, that this legal process has been. And these accusations that these women have brought, it's just really astounding, and that there's something wrong. And so I know that the lawsuit doesn't in and of itself prove that, but the lawsuit is a legitimate step in raising questions that I just don't think the media can ignore anymore. So I want to jump into it with our guest. A number of you probably already know her from the Amber Heard Johnny Depp legal analysis that she provides on my channel. Hi, Andrea. How are you doing?
Hi, Colonel. Let me be the first to congratulate you on your well-deserved victory lap today.
Woo! I know it's not even it's not even like my victory. I know, I'm gonna seem like one of those loony people now that starts to identify too closely with a celebrity. But
but I have to say, it's you have been one of the few. Excuse me. You have been one of the few brave ones who is willing to be the gadfly and to take the unpopular position. It's a big reason why you have so much of the support that you do, and you should feel excellent at being vindicated.
Well, thank you for saying that. I would say that's sweet, but you don't strike me as a sweet person. So I think you mean that, and I appreciate it. And, it's one of those things, like, it's crazy how it happened, how I got into this Manson stuff. This Manson thing, because I originally wanted to make videos about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I was inspired by Brian McPherson, Incredibly Average Brian or whatever, who made those brilliant videos about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. And so I thought, well, I would love to start doing that. But what's funny is really, it was just a few weeks after I started making the Johnny Depp videos that all of these allegations came out against Marilyn Manson. And so I've really been with it from the beginning. So it is like, it's a good day. It's just a good day because now that he is suing them, he's suing the two instigators, Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore. Now that he is suing them in court, and now that he's gotten it on, on record, at least the allegations of some of the crazy stuff that they've done, the diabolical stuff they've done that we'll talk about in a moment. Now there's something that people like me can point to and say, no, I'm not crazy. Like, there are legitimate reasons to think there's a problem here. So anyway, so I'll tell our audience that Andrea follows the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation case very closely and has done videos on that before. The Marilyn Manson case, really not so much up until very recently. And so I'm curious, Andrea, I like that perspective. I'm curious, as someone who has not been in any way invested in this, and then seeing this lawsuit today, putting my own feelings of hope and triumph aside, what is your take on this situation?
Oh, I mean, this lawsuit has just completely refigured the battlefield. This is going to come as a massive shock to the public at large. There's just been such a strong and broad push by Evan Rachel Wood and the support and supporters she has in the media, her documentary, all of this publicity surrounding her efforts with the legislation in California. The messaging has been really very largely one-sided. And that's, again, why I have to commend you for being such a gadfly, willing to take the difficult, hard position of, maybe we ought to sit back for a moment and accept that allegations are allegations and wait for the other side to be heard. So today is going to be the first moment that a lot of people are hearing that, in fact, there is another side. It reminds me a lot of my own entry into the Johnny Depp case, because I had been aware of it swirling for a long time. But it wasn't until the declaration of Kate James, the Amber Heard's assistant, became public, and, was talking about some of these bizarre behaviors that Amber Heard engaged in, and how, terrible she was towards Johnny Depp and basically everyone. And that's
was that really the first that the public had heard of the other side, that Amber Heard could be.
It was for me.
Yeah.
Just, like I said, I hadn't really been following it that closely. And then the Tara Roberts came out shortly after that. She's the housekeeper in the Bahamas who saw Amber Heard, pelting him with a can of paint thinner and stuff. So these things becoming public had a major effect on the public opinion. People like me who've just been kind of peripherally aware of it, don't really care one way or the other, or the other. Kind of a fence sitter, so to speak. That was the information that, made me a believer in Johnny Depp's victimization at the hands of this hoax. And so I think we're really in a parallel moment here with Marilyn Manson's case. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, wow. So you think that it's I'm not delusional to think that it is a very definitive moment in a way, or meaningful.
I mean, of course, lots can still happen. There's going to be challenges to this that I'm sure, we'll get to talk about. But at least from the PR perspective, not that I'm a PR expert or anything like that, but just this is a massive new piece of information that is so completely different from the information that's been fed out to the public so far, that it's almost certainly going to, have a massive reaction. So we'll see.
Well, so that's really interesting to hear you say that stuff. And my question, is, again, I know you don't have special expertise in PR, but do you feel like the Me Too narrative is so entrenched, and there's so much fear about letting in another narrative, that do you think it's possible that the media just basically overlooks this? That it gets kind of reported like today in the next few days and in some outlets, but that it doesn't, that the narrative continues to be for Marilyn Manson, like it was for Johnny Depp for a while. People were saying, they're just both toxic. It was like in Johnny Depp, it went through stages of, like, at first it's like, he's a wife beater. And then it was like, they're both toxic. And I just kind of wonder if the media's, I guess I'm asking, do you think the media will bury this, or do you think it could have a big effect?
It's a really good question. I'm definitely going to be paying attention to see what outlets pick it up, especially this early on. So far, I've seen TMZ and Variety, and those are the only, big names that have jumped on it. The day is young. I think the news just broke about 90 minutes ago. So we'll have to see how that develops. I think that it's going to be challenging, if only because the allegations that Marilyn Manson makes in this lawsuit are themselves so salacious, so over the top, and so well documented that
really
it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's on TMZ, has a copy of the, the letter that she has ostensibly forged as the federal agent. I mean, this is definitely bombshell level stuff.
Well, so that's what one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you feel as a lawyer, because again, I have no way of knowing, it seems big to me, but as a lawyer, do you think it is, like you said, well substantiated or documented, these charges?
It appears to be. Now, we haven't seen, of course, the actual complaint, the actual documents yet. We don't know all of the details. The documents are going to have to be authenticated for them to be acceptable as any kind of evidence in court. And so what that means is that Marilyn Manson is going to have to explain the provenance of these documents. How did he get them? How does he know that they're legitimate? They'll probably go through the same type of analysis as like the forensic types of investigations that are going on in the Johnny Depp case. So it's possible, I suppose, that it's false, but bear in mind, you know, lawyers everywhere have a responsibility and a duty that can get them in serious trouble with the bar, to put forward information that hasn't been, they haven't taken reasonable steps to verify. This is very much the case in California, which has a little bit of a stronger pleading standard when it comes to lawyers than, for example, my experience up here in Washington. As a lawyer in California, for example, you can get in trouble for relying on just what your client told you, without engaging in some type of independent investigation to affirmatively verify that information before you put it in a court pleading. Right. So I have to assume from that, they have a pretty substantial basis to attribute this letter to Evan Rachel Wood, and that they will be able to establish that.
Yeah, it seems that they do, and also they've got handwritten notes from between Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore about various things that are various allegations that are made in the lawsuit. They've and it seems like and other things, but again, you know, that forged FBI document, and then these notes, at times extensive, at times handwritten, among other things. So that's interesting to hear you say that assuming these documents were legit, that it seems to be a fairly well substantiated case. Now, you said salacious earlier. And, you know, about that Marilyn Manson is making some salacious charges in this. And so I'm curious, I know we're in the rock star world, and so it's not going to be like your average everyday person's lawsuits, right? But how, from the perspective, again, of a lawyer, and how kind of out there are these charges, or the things that Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore are accused of doing, or is it, how out there is it?
Yeah, well, impersonating a federal officer is a felony. It's a federal felony punishable by up to 3 years in prison. And granted, a lot of less important, less famous people than Evan Rachel Wood have been prosecuted under that statute for far less.
Smollett part two. Anyway, oh my God.
But,
okay, so.
Certainly, I mean, if that is substantiated, that's a federal crime. That is potentially a big problem. It's a big embarrassment, not just for her, but for her political backers. I find the timing of this too is really fascinating. I'm interested to see how it unfolds. My perspective as a lawyer is that I would anticipate that part of the strategy on Marilyn Manson's team at this point is going to be to send specific notice of this lawsuit and its allegations to HBO, to put them on notice that should they go forward with the airing of this Phoenix Rising documentary that's set to come out in, I don't know, the next couple weeks or so, that's going to be a knowing republication of a falsehood. He's going to put them on notice that it's false. He's contesting it. He's sued over it. And in the event that they republish these accusations that she's making, that they're essentially acting with actual malice. So I think there's going to be a real upping of the ante in terms of the.
So wait, you're saying, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're saying that they this documentary, that this lawsuit could put enough heat on HBO where they would have to at least consider pulling it? Like it's kind of serious for them?
It would be prudent for them, I think, to, yes, consider pulling it at this point.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, again, we'll see. One of the challenges, of course, we've talked about it in Johnny Depp's case, it's going to be an issue in this case as well, is the challenge you have in the United States anytime you want to try to sue somebody for something that they've said or prevent them from being able to speak. That type of standard is just extremely high and hard to reach here. With somebody like a news agency or a publisher or somebody like HBO, a content creator, they've typically had an enormous amount of leeway to just be able to put on whatever sort of viewpoints they want, because the actual malice standard is so strict. It's actual knowledge that what you're putting on is false, or that you had, such severe doubts about the truth of it that you effectively believed it was false and aired it anyway. And so that's always been very difficult to prove. And it allows, organizations like HBO to be able to put these kinds of accusations out there, when somebody like Marilyn Manson isn't getting the platform to be able to, put out that there is in fact an opposing point of view. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he does start taking an aggressive stand on, look, I have contested this. I have proof of fabrications that she's told. I have proof of crimes that she has committed in her effort to gin up and perpetrate these accusations. And HBO, you have knowledge now that you are complicit in defaming me.
I see. Well, and so that's really fascinating. I'm glad I had you on here, because I wasn't even thinking about HBO, that component of it. I just thought, it'll be kind of embarrassing for them. But if they're now, because it seems like I do believe that a documentary filmmaker and the producers have a duty, if they're going to accuse somebody of being a rapist, and they're going to sling all of these accusations that are going to have a severe effect on him financially in various other ways. It seems like they have some kind of a duty, some kind of due diligence to investigate a little. And so I hadn't thought about it, but I guess you're right. So I hope that they feel some pressure. The thing I was going to ask you is, so what about, how do I want to say this? What about the, just a second, I'm going to cut this out. There was something I was going to ask you. Something about, what is the HBO's duty to them? Maybe it'll come to me. That's no problem. So, okay. You talked about how the standard, you talked about how the standard for these types of defamation lawsuits is pretty steep, and that the person would need to know that they're lying. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's essentially what actual malice is.
So would that apply not only to the lies that Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore said about Manson, but what about the impersonating of the FBI agent? Like they knew they weren't an FBI agent, right? And so they were knowingly, would that count too?
Potentially, because to the extent that they are making those statements for the purpose of smearing, Marilyn Manson in order to cause him reputational harm, to get people to, make false accusations against him and stuff. That can certainly fall directly under the actual malice umbrella. The bigger picture with it, though, really is just that it's such strong evidence of her lack of good faith in this entire process altogether.
And that I love hearing you say things like that. Like you keep saying, strong evidence and stuff, because like normally you're the one who's, I feel like, is always kind of like tempering, my expectations, or you talk a lot about people need to manage their expectations and things like that. So it's interesting to hear you say that. And because I kind of wondered if it was almost, there's definitely real stuff in here, and I definitely believe he's innocent, but I kind of wondered how much of this was a kind of just a publicity tactic, as opposed to a serious legal maneuver. But it sounds like you're saying it's very credible.
I think it's a very credible legal maneuver. And so let's talk real quickly about what we can anticipate the next steps are going to be, because California, of course, has the first, and I think probably still the most stringent in the country, anti-SLAPP statute. And so for those who haven't been following the Johnny Depp case from forever and don't remember all that stuff, the anti-SLAPP is the strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's a process that California was the first in the nation to adopt. And the purpose of it is that when somebody files a lawsuit, like for defamation, or to basically try to shut down speech or to penalize somebody for something that they've said, if that speech is entitled to constitutional protection, then California basically lets you go to court very early on in the process. You get to pause discovery, and you basically get to compel the other person to have to prove their case without the benefit of discovery, in order for it to be able to go forward. And so that is part of the reason I think that it's helpful for people to understand context wise. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, why didn't he bring this up earlier? You know, why is it taking him so long?
Why didn't Manson? Yeah.
Why is it taking him so long to react? And this anti-SLAPP process is exactly the reason why. The way that the statute's written in California, Evan Rachel Wood is going to have 60 days to file a motion to, SLAPP, to basically dismiss his lawsuit on the grounds that her speech is constitutionally protected and she can't be sued for it. And then Marilyn Manson, has a short period of time to respond. He doesn't have the opportunity to engage in discovery before that. So that means that he's going to have to prove to a California court, I can make a case for defamation against Evan Rachel Wood, meaning I can prove it's false, I can prove it's defamatory, and I can prove that she acted with actual malice, without the benefit of being able to get into her hard drives and her communications and all of those other things that discovery in a lawsuit will open up. He had to have this information independently, and that is absolutely going to take time.
Wow. Well, okay. So she's going to do the SLAPP. She's going to do the SLAPP thing. And Amber did try that. Is that right? You said?
Yes, Amber did try that. And the Virginia statute is nowhere near as, it's one of the weaker anti-SLAPP statutes among states that have them. And so it doesn't really have a process like California does to say stop and throw the case out early. What Virginia has is a statute or a court rule that basically says if you prevail after trial on a case like this, you'll be entitled to recover your costs and attorney fees. Normally in the US, that's not the case. The rule is that each party to a lawsuit bears their own costs. So it's called a cost shifting provision. So that's all that the Virginia statute does. Amber Heard has asked for this cost shifting after the Depp trial. She will have to win, in order to
I see.
That. So California's is very, very different in that it is designed to cut these lawsuits off at the inception and to make it very, very difficult for them to go forward.
Lawsuits like Manson's lawsuits, yes. That would, I guess, because they don't want, they're very invested in supposed victims or accusers' rights, and they don't want to deter accusers. And I understand that if accusers were always innocent, but anyway, okay, so that's going to happen. And then if you had to wager, would you say that would be successful if she did file a SLAPP lawsuit or whatever?
It will. I have to, talking about managing expectations, it'll be amazing if it does, because just again, the standard's hard. He has to make a prima facie case, meaning he has to present evidence that would be enough to go to the jury on every element of every claim that he's making. That is a very, very difficult.
It's unlikely it could overcome a SLAPP objection.
That's the question, when I look at this lawsuit and I see the care that he has taken in substantiating these claims so far, that tells me he's filed this lawsuit knowing that the anti-SLAPP challenge is coming and he is prepared for that. So, it would be hard for me in any circumstance to say, sure, I think this is going to sail through the anti-SLAPP challenge. It's such a narrow channel that he has to sail. but he looks like he has set himself up in pretty good position to potentially survive it. And if he does, that's going to be remarkable. And so don't be surprised too that over the next several days, as Evan Rachel Wood and her PR gets geared up to respond to this, that's going to be the nature of their response. They're going to anticipate that, that they're going to be successful in an anti-slap challenge. So they're going to be talking about things about how, these are unsubstantiated and it's punitive and retaliatory against her for exercising her speech rights and exercising her, power to influence legislation and so forth. So they're going to take a very dismissive approach to it that way. That's how I expect the messaging to line up going into this anti-slap motion. So if Marilyn Manson is in fact able to survive that type of motion, it's going to be earth-shattering.
Wow, really? Well, okay. So let me ask you though. I mean, let's say, I hope it's not like a dumb question, but let's say that let's say that this man is innocent. Okay. Which I believe, and I don't know what your opinions are, but it doesn't really matter for this discussion. Let's say that Marilyn Manson is innocent. And you've already said that you feel like it's potentially a very compelling case that he's brought. Does it seem like right to you that it should get slapped down? Like, is there something wrong with California laws is what I'm asking? Because it doesn't seem right to me that it should be like running the gauntlet or like, threading, a camel through the eye of a needle or whatever. Sure. to bring a legitimate defamation lawsuit against somebody.
Sure. Well, is it right? I mean, the cynic in me says, what does that have to do with the law?
Yeah, I was leaving myself open on that.
I mean, the reality is that the law is always about threading the needle and swinging the pendulum and take this action. And it has this, anticipated or unanticipated negative side effect. And then you adjust for that. And that's just how it all develops.
Well, let me ask you this. What kinds of a lawsuit then, or what's kind of a hypothetical situation would be a pretty definite, like, shoe-in to get past the slap? Is there something you could conceive of that would be like, what could do it?
An admission of knowingly telling a falsehood. If they have something that can be characterized as an admission of a lie, if they can get Evan Rachel Wood or any of the hoaxers or any of the accusers to substantiate really any part of these accusations.
Well, in between, you and me, but I hear you. Okay. But continue.
Yeah. So, I can say that there has been a lot of criticism of the strictness of the defamation laws in general in the last several years. We may have talked about this before, the kind of surprising flag bearer in all of this is Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is a constitutional originalist. He believes in the original language and meaning and intent of the framers in writing the Constitution. And he has pointed out fairly and I think correctly that the actual malice requirement is not constitutional. It was judicially created back in the 1960s. And it may have, been imprudent because, as you pointed out, it does cut off a lot of situations that would seem to be plainly unfair. If you're being smeared, and even if you can prove you're being smeared, but you can't prove that the other person acted with the requisite mental state, then you're out of luck.
Wow. Yeah.
I think it is becoming a little bit of a situation where more and more people are starting to question whether that's the way our legal system should operate.
Okay. Well, thanks for enlightening me on all of that. Even, and it's one of those things too, that it's not discouraging in the sense that, like this friend of mine told me, this is more for the sake of the media and the truth getting out there and showing people that there's another side to the story than it is necessarily about winning. But it would be nice. It really would be nice to win. And like you say, if it's almost miraculous, who better than Marilyn Manson to do something completely miraculous and win this defamation?
I love it. The savior of our country.
Well, he has made this kind of sort of pantomime of a return to Christianity. As you may know, he and Kanye have been doing like some Sunday services. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Okay, so what else? I mean, the stuff you've been saying is really fascinating. Are there other things that you find interesting? Well, okay, let me bring up one thing. All of the allegations in the lawsuit, this has not been discussed yet. I guess now that the lawsuit is available, people will start talking about it. But it's alleged in the lawsuit that Ilma Gore basically hacked into Marilyn Manson's various social media accounts and was trying to download and send pornography. And we don't know what kind of pornography. I believe because the links or the files are corrupt or whatever. But I don't know. But we know that she was doing that. Was basically trying to make him look like a pervert at best. And then also we find out that Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore did a fake swatting of Marilyn Manson's house. So, a year ago after the allegations came out, it was a big media story, very embarrassing for him. The police had to come to his house at night because someone had called for a wellness check and, whatever. And so apparently that was Ilma Gore basically filing a false police report or whatever it is and to try to make him look unhinged and everything. But one of the things that's been pointed out to me is that can actually be really dangerous because in these SWAT situations, I mean, are really high intensity, very sometimes very chaotic, very unpredictable, and very dangerous. And so, you put someone's life in danger when you say that someone's maybe suicidal or crazy or whatever with a gun. So anyway, that was interesting, and so I guess what I'm saying is that plus the charges of the FBI impersonation and the fact that Evan Rachel Wood would even impersonate an FBI agent in her son's custody hearings. That was another thing that was brought out is that in this battle with Jamie Bell over where the son would live, she was filing these fake FBI documents as a part of her custody. So I guess my point of all of that is to say, this is pretty bizarre behavior for like a supposedly normal person, right? Like someone who is an established actress. I can't speak for the crazy artist Ilma Gore, but Evan Rachel Wood, an established actress and has been successful enough at life to be where she's at. Does it seem just like bizarre to you?
It's certainly behaviorally problematic. We would look at these things as being rather antisocial in nature.
Are they serious legally? Like, are some of these things pretty serious legally? You said the FBI thing.
Oh, absolutely. The FBI thing, any type of obviously, if they're trying to access and attribute child porn to Marilyn Manson, that's a huge problem for them just accessing it in the first place. Let alone the conspiracy, to try to tar him with that kind of thing.
Right. We don't know if, and to be clear, we don't know it was child porn, but we don't know what kind it was, and
sure.
That's something I've heard speculated. But anyway, yeah.
That is an if, definitely an if.
Right.
But that of course is potentially a problem. The swatting, it's kind of difficult because, like you pointed out, it's technically just a false police report, which is not really in most places regarded as a super serious crime.
Sure.
And I don't recall offhand if it is in California. I kind of, because I looked at that before, I kind of remember there's one that's a felony, but then most like making false statements types of things are just misdemeanors.
Right.
So they don't tend to get all that much outrage. But you're absolutely correct. These are extremely dangerous circumstances. People have died as a result of swatting. There have been states that have adopted specific measures dealing with swatting, as a specific practice. But it doesn't look like California is one of those. So it's really hard to say how serious they're going to take it. I can definitely say that the agencies that were, brought into that, hoaxed into that, are not going to be at all pleased at, at having been put in that position. And to the extent that they're also the ones that will potentially be investigating Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore for a lot of these accusations in this lawsuit that do appear to have evidence to substantiate them, that was not a wise choice of alliances or disalliances.
Well, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because, I talked, as you know, I was contacted by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department several months ago, and they wanted to talk to me about this case. And at the time, I didn't want to share anything about it. I recorded the call, or my end of it, with his permission, the detective's permission. But since then, I feel more comfortable talking about some of the things that were discussed. And, but anyway, that's one of the main things that came up. I asked this detective. So basically the detective Special Victims Unit, who was in charge of investigating the Marilyn Manson case, he contacted me because he wanted some contact information from some of the people that I'd interviewed. And so it was really it was that simple. It didn't want any insight or anything from me, much to my sadness, but I was going to give it to him no matter what. And so I'm sure he was very happy about that. But yeah, I had I didn't want to alienate him by making him listen to me for too long, but I thought, I'll make him listen to me for 5 or 6 minutes or whatever. Right.
Perfect.
So I had several things that I've said to him. I've already released that in the video. But one thing I asked was, I said, what is the penalty? Is there a legal penalty beyond civil suits and stuff? But in terms of criminal penalties, what happens if you had this hoax, hypothetically speaking, you had these women in who constructed this elaborate hoax? Does the law just not care if people make up stuff? And his response, interesting, was what you had said. What he said to me was, well, we would not be happy that we put all of these man hours into all of this work and into this, and for it not to turn out to be legit. But and then he said something about reference to penalties for filing a false police report. But do you think there could be any consequences that are more serious than just a slap on the wrist for these women?
I mean, it looks like the biggest exposure at this point is this accusation about the impersonating the federal officer. Like I said, that's a federal felony. That's up to 3 years in prison. That's potentially very serious stuff. Again, it just comes down to how pissed off are these agencies at what's been done, and how much does that counteract the factor that we always have with the 2-tier justice system, and the fact that these are special people. They're ostensibly the ones that get excused for their wrongdoing. So right. How realistic is it that the FBI and the Department of Justice are going to go after Evan Rachel Wood, particularly when there's a certain amount of political affiliation between the goals and the goals of the certainly the appointed ranks in the Department of Justice at this point in time?
Well, and so you bring up several things there, because as you're talking about, the political figures that would need to get involved in this, or political sympathy or whatever. And I'm just thinking about, pretty little delicate looking Evan Rachel Wood. And this is the advantage that so many women have, but pretty delicate, innocent looking Evan Rachel Wood, talking about shaking and crying as she talks about her traumas, like she did. If you look at her testimony before the California Assembly, before Congress, she's shaking and kind of crying and stuff. She's convincing. She's a good actress. But you put that up against, and then all of a sudden I have this vision of Marilyn Manson, right? And it's just that's the thing is, you're asking. It's but Manson supporters like myself, we're asking for people to side with someone who has spent his entire life basically trying to alienate himself from society, at least artistically or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so, there is a kind of, I've talked about this on my channel before, just in a sort of karmic way, there is a kind of a cause and effect that's playing out here, which is not at all to say that he in any way, he deserves what's happening or whatever. Obviously, I don't think so. But, it is, his image is not helping him. Let's just put it that way. Let's put it that
Sure.
way. He's cultivated.
I think that's part of what's made him such a perfect victim for exactly this kind of hoax is he's just such an easy target. You know, I don't know. I have my perspective from where I sit, of course, and where I work, and I don't claim to be any sort of universal, vision on anything. I'm like you. I'm more of the gadfly, but I do feel a sense of a shift, and that might just be optimism on my part, but I feel like we're just coming to more of a point of recognizing, not just the basic don't judge the book by its cover. Everything is not always what it seems. We're so much more aware of how information is manipulated and, stories and narratives are manufactured. But also just that the whole reason we have this rule of law in the first place isn't because we need to protect the people who are popular, the people who are powerful, the people who are rich, the people who are innocent. Those are the ones that will always have somebody in their corner. We have the justice system because we need to protect the worst of the worst. There's a saying in criminal defense that the law doesn't exist to protect the public from our clients. It exists to protect our clients from the public, because the people who are guilty, the people who are wrongdoing, or the people that just look like it are the first ones who are thrown to the wolves as soon as the legal system gets their teeth into them. So there has been a big switch in public consciousness, I think, over the past several years, regardless of what you think about, Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole separate topic. But that just has brought a lot of these types of issues out into the forefront. So I am optimistic that is starting to change, and that there will be less of an impulse to see Marilyn Manson as, look at him, of course he must be guilty.
Well, that's really great to hear. And I would like to think that what you're saying is true, that there is a kind of a shift occurring where people realize that maybe we've stepped too far. We've gone too far. We need to step back from the brink. When it comes to some of the stuff like cancel culture and Me Too and some of these, witch hunts and so forth. And, which is not to say that if Marilyn Manson did legitimately rape someone, that would be a witch hunt, right? But the whole point that I've been trying to make on my show for the past year is that the evidence has been in his favor. Actually, the more you dig into it, the more you see that there's no evidence on the accuser's side, and that there's really been a lot of indications that there's something wrong with the accusers and what they're doing and how all this came to be. But again, his image is to so many people, it's so obvious. And the other problem is that book that he wrote, his autobiography, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell. There's a truck going by, it's kind of loud. But his autobiography, it turns out, that it was ghost written, and that there was a lot of it that was bullshit and that was just put in there to be interesting. But the problem is that he was trying to be provocative, and it was a different time. It was the early 90s. So
90s were such a different time.
Yeah, I know, and I have a lot of nostalgia in a lot of ways for a lot of it. But yeah, so it was written to be provocative. It was not written with any kind of like gender issues in mind or whatever. And a lot of it was false. But the problem is that gets brought up a lot now. And if you were to take the book as fact, then it certainly would indicate that somebody probably has some issues, women, disturbed or whatever. So that's a problem. But anyway. So what else? I think this conversation has been great. I'm trying to think about, Manson, what Manson supporters would want me to ask you. So we talked about the next step with this, the slap objection that Evan Rachel Wood is going to probably file. What do you see maybe a bit further down the road? I know it's early, do you have any sense of how you think this could all end up playing out? And I mean, not just in terms of like the legal stuff, but even like the larger public perception.
Yeah, I think the slap motion is going to be really important. there's a possibility, of course, that the case could settle either before or after the anti-SLAPP if it survives. So I won't be surprised at all if those types of channels, are already in motion. Discovery is painful, whether you're innocent or guilty. It's a situation of the process is the punishment. You can kind of see that again with the Johnny Depp trial. If you've kept up on like the 20th request for production, number 800 that Amber Heard's lawyer keeps filing about.
Oh my gosh.
It's the process that is the punishment. It's extremely intrusive. It's extremely
long and
the problem is that even if you didn't actually do anything wrong, how many of us are saints walking around, making perfect decisions every day? We all have things.
Nobody wants somebody doing stuff. Yeah.
Even if it's just like, oh gosh, how many times really did you look at crazy days and nights, when you're during your work hours, it's nothing. Nobody cares, but it's something that people would be embarrassed about, to have that type of thing known. So there's all kinds of incentives.
And then there's some of us who actually have like real legitimate things that we would not need to know.
And that's just the whole next level. If Evan Rachel Wood is implicated in federal criminal activity, okay, then digging deeper into that and substantiating that further and further is very much not going to be in her interests. She's not going to want that. Obviously, if you have stuff to hide, discovery is bad. But even if you don't, it's just something that most people are really going to want to avoid. So I do expect that there's going to be early channels open. So
I was going to say, are we basically like in an Amber Heard situation where these gals have boxed, specifically the two main ones that have boxed themselves into a corner, like they thought it was all fun and games. It seemed like it would be so much fun back when, they were getting, to do their interviews and they were getting write-ups and they were getting to go before Congress and all of that. But now that the legal stuff's kind of kicked in, it's gone sort of serious. Now they're like trapped. Do you think that's kind of what's happening then?
I think it's possible. The roller coaster is very intoxicating, but when you want to get off, you want to get off right now. And sorry, you have to wait until the ride is over.
Well put.
So, I mean, I think that there probably is a lot of anxiety on their side at this moment. I do, like I said, expect that their response is going to be aggressive. They're going to act like it's it's made up. It's not going to survive the SLAPP challenge. It's retaliation against her, trying to be a good civic person and speaking her truth and all that stuff.
Right.
I don't know Evan Rachel Wood at all. Obviously, of course, I don't know Amber Heard either. Just being able to kind of watch them, how they handle these types of processes. And I will say that I do get more of a sense of openness to ambivalence from Evan Rachel Wood than I've ever gotten from Amber Heard. With Amber Heard, it's much more just once she started digging, she's going to come out of China before she ever stops. She's just never going to back down and accept any type of even like maybe I misperceived things. Like she can't even go there.
No, she cannot. She is a fighter in the negative sense, and she can't stand down. Evan Rachel Wood, you think maybe there's a bit more complexity there?
I mean, it's hard to say. Just from what I know about how her story sort of has emerged, there does seem to me to be a little bit more room there for treating it as, oh, this has been like a process of me coming to terms with my trauma, and I've had this perception, I've had that perception. It's not at all uncommon. I mean, I don't know about you. Just I can think of a lot of situations of conversations I've had with all kinds of different women. It's not at all uncommon for people to have sort of gray area, ambiguous kinds of sexual experiences that you aren't really sure how you feel about it or what you think about it or how this unfolded. And there's kind of a process of kind of coming to terms with these types of things. And so I would expect that it's not that unusual for people to go through a process of, this is, I feel like it's rape right now. That's easy. It's easy to put it in black and white, easy for me to kind of deal with emotionally. And then as, time has gone on and I can accept a little bit more ambiguity in the situation, maybe I'll move away from that. So I could see the possibility of Evan Rachel Wood basically saving herself through some kind of explanation like that this is trauma processing. It's her perspective. And, maybe in hindsight, her perspective isn't definitive and, she shouldn't have spoken out like it was or something.
Mistakes were made.
Yes, it'll give her a face-saving exit. Maybe that would be for the best.
She, I think that what you might find interesting as this proceeds, and if you look more deeply at her or at her in with the same attention that we've given Amber Heard over the years or the months. I think that Evan Rachel Wood, this is just purely my opinion, but I think that she is as diabolical or as, if we want to use the word like evil or messed
malevolent.
Up. Malevolent. Thank you. I think that she's as malevolent or as personality disordered as Amber Heard, but I think that she lacks that fighter temperament that Amber with those rings and everything. Like it's all, she even says it on those tapes with Johnny Depp, you don't fight, right? I don't think that that's what's fueling Evan as much. And in fact, Evan, she went on Instagram one time and was showing off her self-cutting, and stuff. And so there is that there that maybe she wouldn't take it take it all the way to the wall, like Amber would, that maybe she would stand down in some way. But I will say the flip side of that, though, is that she has done a hell of a lot of really ruthless things, and they're not all in that lawsuit. There's a lot of stuff that, I've had people talk about in interviews on my channel who knew her, and then I've heard other things, but there's she's done some really diabolical things where Manson is concerned, and she's I'll just put it this way, she is a very disturbed woman. And whether that level of being disturbed is going to translate into the same behavior as Amber Heard, or it's going to be different, maybe more muted, I don't know. But she definitely is very malevolent or very disturbed. And again, to what degree it's malevolence and to what degree it's craziness, I don't know. But anyway. So, and it's interesting. Last thing I would say is that it's interesting if and when you get to watch the HBO documentary, because I've already seen half of it when it premiered at Sundance online. But if you watch it, it is really fascinating how much time they spend in the documentary trying to establish that Evan Rachel Wood is emotionally and psychologically disturbed. They do it because they're trying to build a case for how someone like her could be manipulated by Manson, because most of what they talk about in the documentary, they don't actually get into hardcore rape allegations and stuff. They talk about how he coerced her into a relationship.
Grooming.
Right. Exactly. Grooming and coercion and manipulation, all that. And so they have to establish, I guess they felt like they had to establish in the documentary how this adult woman could claim to have fallen under this guy's spell. And so what they do is they spend the first literally third of the documentary establishing all the different ways in which Evan Rachel Wood was emotionally disturbed from her childhood. Her father was delusional and was a narcissist. She never knew. She talks about, and everybody in the documentary and her family, they talk on camera about how she didn't know fantasy from reality. That was one of her big challenges, is she couldn't distinguish reality from fantasy. Things like this. She found her genitalia grotesque. And anyway, I'm not saying that all of these things mean that someone is super disturbed. I realize, childhood, adolescence, we go through things, but
these are strikes. I mean,
they
any behavior oriented, clinician is going to see these as strikes.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I don't know. We will see. What else? So anything else from a legal perspective, as someone who is, I know we've talked about the case before. I know you're not unfamiliar with it, but as someone who's now becoming more familiar, is there anything else that you think is significant, or that Manson needs to watch out for, or that you see becoming an issue, or Evan Rachel Wood? Like, what do you think right now her lawyers are telling her? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh boy. I mean, at this point, her lawyers are basically looking to her for explanations of, how do we explain some of these allegations? Obviously, the basic format.
You're cool. You can answer that.
No, I'm not going to.
Yeah, explanations, as in like what the is going on.
Yeah. And so the basic format with a lawsuit, the first thing you do, you sit down with your client, you have to file an answer admitting or denying these things. So we're going to go through these allegations one by one and admit or deny. And then, you probably need to explain a little bit of, the basis for that. So there is probably at this point, that's what the main focus is going to be on is, are these true? Are they not true? How are we going to deal with them, one way or the other? Because they're in the hot seat in terms of coming up with their response. I mean, they're going to need to publicly respond to this lawsuit very soon, probably before the end of the day. I would say tomorrow, really at the latest. I could be wrong about that. And again, that probably just is a reflection of how much does the media actually end up covering this? How broadly does it get picked up? But she's got a lot of pressure on her to respond publicly and quickly. So the lawyers are going to want to be very careful about formulating that, because as we've seen in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, the things that you say publicly about the case can come back and bite you hard later on if you didn't do your homework up front.
So if you were, you sure you don't need to get that? I really don't mind. We're not rush.
No, it's fine.
So if you were one of Evan Rachel Wood's attorneys, or let's just say you're her main attorney, oh shoot, just a second. I need to plug this in. Just a moment. Well, actually, I think we've got enough time, because this is actually my last question, and this is great material. So I don't want to have it go too long. And really, I think I'll just be able to quickly edit it and get it out. Okay. So if you're Evan Rachel Wood's attorney, what are you thinking? You've told me how you would deal with your client, right? But what are you actually like thinking or feeling at this point, especially if it's something that's come kind of out of nowhere? If you thought that your client was on the level and now you're seeing all this, like, what are you thinking or feeling?
That's the real question right there is, did I know this was coming, or did I suspect this was coming, or have I been blindsided? I think most attorneys operate under a trust but verify type of basis. Maybe it's a little bit more for me since I'm dealing with criminal defendants. I'm used to being lied to. I kind of expect to be lied to. Like, it's almost weird if somebody is forthcoming and truthful. And so you always kind of, it's not that you don't take your client's perspective position into account. It's just that it's just one piece of evidence. If my client gets on the stand and testifies, that's one piece of evidence. I'm really interested in what is the rest of the universe that's out here that could potentially be brought to bear on our case. And so that is what I would expect a lot of the focus with her is going to be on now is, what else is going to be found, either out there available to be gotten from third parties, or should the case go forward to discovery and they can get into your computer? Do we need to be worried about
Sorry, it's my cat.
I'm surprised my dog hasn't done that yet, actually. She was literally fussy until like 2 minutes before.
Hold on a second. Probably a good indication time to wrap up, but repeat the last couple of sentences or whatever before she started making all the noise, if you can remember.
So it's just going to depend. I'm going to be having the conversations about what else could be out there, right. If this case, either number one, because they're already going to probably be wondering, where did Marilyn Manson get this stuff? How did he get access to it? He's got a source. Who is that? What else might that person have? What else might other people have? Are, other people going to flip? They're running a lot of these scenes.
Trying to plug holes on the leaking ship, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's like a battle plan, like, oh shit, the whole character of this front over here just changed, dramatically. So how do we have to shift our resources now? And so that's what really is going to potentially be affected a lot by whether they saw this coming. If they saw this coming, it's not that big of a deal. They can just shift strategies. But if you're blindsided by your client, you're now not in a position where you can really trust your client to be honest and forthcoming with you when they say, oh no, there's nothing else they could possibly find, nothing out there in discovery, etc. Well, it's not really the lawyer's choice, of course. It's always the client's choice what their course of action is going to be. But it's going to be your job as the lawyer, of course, to counsel them about the risks that they're going to face, depending on how things unfold. And so, yeah, I expect that they're probably having those types of hard conversations with her about, this is what the risks are going into the anti-SLAPP. These are the risks coming out of the anti-SLAPP, should it survive the anti-SLAPP. And she's going to have to make some hard choices about her strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, like I was saying, I do think there's a deep well of dysfunction with that, because it's like I was saying, it's not just Amber Freudian slip. It's not just Ilma and Evan, but we've also got the Game of Thrones woman Ezra Bianco and Ashley Lindsay Morgan, and there's a lot of crazies. But anyway, I think that is really, like I've said in my videos, I think that people have to understand that Marilyn Manson draws a particular client, a particular type of fan base. And so they're not, no offense to my Manson fans, they're not all crazy. Probably most of them aren't, right? But you're going to have more of the Evan Rachel Woods in that group than you're going to have like a Josh Groban concert or something.
Well, the other piece too, not to take that too far, because you've had some amazing women on your channel who've obviously had what they describe as very happy and positive relationships with Marilyn Manson. Right. But I would also point out that relationships in general often follow a pattern, and so if you pick one Evan Rachel Wood, there's probably a good chance you picked other Evan Rachel Woods in your life.
Right. And you're not wrong. I mean, Manson has said, present wife accepted, but Manson has said before that he says flypaper to damaged women. So he's certainly aware of it. But anyways, so I'm almost out of battery and the cat is meowing and threatening to ruin another scene. So I'm going to let Andrea go. And I just have to say though, I think we're definitely from here on out, as long as this is a legal issue, I would anticipate for at least the next few years, poor Manson. But we're going to be covering it, and I really want you to come back regularly, because there really is no one else covering this right now. Even in the legal community, I feel like, but people are going to start getting on board and waking up to the fact this is an interesting case. So anyway, I look forward to having you back, Andrea, and again to my audience. I always do the money pitch at the end, but like I like to tell my my fans and supporters, I don't ask for more than you would spend on, a coffee at Starbucks or, a crappy movie on Amazon. Right. And so anyway, but thank you for being here, Andrea. And we will talk about Manson next time.